to enable you to better understand what goes on with your children here in school and also support their learning from home. So we've got Ashley this morning, our maths subject leader and resident maths expert, who's going to go through our calculation policy for Key Stage 2. Over to you, Ash.
Right. I do these workshops. I did one a couple of years ago, and I always like to do them to kind of show you guys how we develop our math policy at school so that you guys can better understand it, better support your children. Every time I do them, I always hear the same thing. That's not how I learned it at school. And, you know, I can do it. And it makes complete sense. And I always like to start by saying, you know, about 5 years ago, I called my dad up. I said, Dad, I'm going back to university. And he's like, okay, what for? I said, I'm going to take maths. Okay, why? Well, I've been given a promotion at work. I'm now the maths coordinator. So he laughed for about 5 minutes. And I'm like, but Ash, do they know how terrible you are at maths? And it's true, I am absolutely horrible at maths. I was that kid who could not learn my times tables. No matter how much my parents bribed me, grounded me, threatened me, I just could not learn my times tables. Mental maths, I couldn't add two-digit numbers and two-digit numbers mentally. I couldn't find patterns. I couldn't find sequences. I always really struggled with maths. And so this is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this calculation policy, because it's about introducing different methods so that every child can access the curriculum in different ways. It's about building on facts that they know and then developing bit by bit so that they have a broader understanding of number. So our aim at Victory Heights, just briefly, is it's progressive, and so it starts with basic facts in FS, and it develops on those facts as they go through the school. So children, when they're doing maths, should always ask themselves a few questions when they're given a sum. So the first one is always, can I do this in my head? Children should always aim to use mental maths as their first go-to. So for example, you get, 20 add 30, that's mental math calculation. 300 add 500, and then as your numbers become more complex, then they need to ask themselves the next question. If I can't do it in my head, if the numbers are too big, what can I do to support doing it in my head? So do I need to use what are called jottings? And I'll go through all the different terms with you again in a bit. Jottings are just where you're writing down simple facts to help you do it in your head. If they can't do that, I need to use formal written methods. I've given you guys a sheet. These are formal written methods. These are like the end result. By end of year 6, they should be able to complete all of these. So what we do is we build up step by step until they can finish those. So it starts mental, jottings, and then formal, depending on which one's appropriate. The reason we teach the different methods is that when they get to year 6, they have to write a SATs. There are 36 questions on the SATs, and they have half an hour to finish it. So each question they look at, children need to be able to understand, they need to be able to process whether it's a mental calculation or a written one. Because if they use formal written methods, for example, for these ones, they would never complete those questions. So they need to realize that adding 40 to 1,000, that can be done mentally. They don't need to line up in columns. When they come to a question like this, they need to recognize that actually I need to work this one out, long formal method, because there's too many opportunities to make mistakes with bigger numbers. Also, in the SATs test, some of these questions are worth 2 marks, and they only get the second mark if they've used a formal written method. So they have to be able to produce these methods to get the second mark on these types of questions. About the SATs, it's about 75% number and calculation. So there's a reasoning test, but it's all supported through the numbers, fractions, decimals, percentages, and calculation. It's 75% of the test. Like I said, these are the formal methods that you've got on your tables. These are probably the ones that you and I are more familiar with. These are the ones I would have learned in school. That didn't quite make sense to me at the time, but as I developed and went back to school, I do now. These are jottings, so these are just quick recordings or notes to help them. And the reason we do, so when I start introducing the grid method or the number line, the reason we do these first is that children need to have an understanding of number. So children attempting to use formal written methods without a secure understanding will know the rules, but they won't develop their understanding. So one of the common mistakes that children do when they're adding or subtracting is they'll do something like this. They'll go 9 add 5, well that's 14, and 3 add 2 is 5. They're going to make this mistake every single time because they don't understand the place value of the numbers. And that's why we introduce things like the number line and the mental methods, so that when it comes to it, a child who understands number will look at this and go, oh, I've obviously made a mistake because 2 tens digits can't equal 500. So there's a reason why we do it in the different ways, building up to this formal method. Just talk really briefly about early childhood, about developing numbers, because most of your children are in key stage 2, yes? So they've gone through this phase already. How children develop numerically is they start by concrete. You know, you've seen it, the 1, 2, actually moving the objects over. They move on to pictorial, and they move on to abstract. Now, abstract, numbers don't make any sense. There's no reason to them, it's like letters. A child might recognize the letter K, at, but they might not be able to put it together yet. Just like in numbers, they'll recognize some of these numbers, but they won't be able to put them together yet. That's why we start with concrete, moving on to pictorial and abstract. Some common terms I'm going to use today are called number bonds. Bonds are any two numbers that make another number. The common ones we use are bonds to 10, 20, 60, and 100. And the reason we introduce this in Key Stage 1 and FS is so that it's a mental strategy to support them later on. Don't worry about taking too much note, guys, because I'm going to throw this up on the app when it's done. So the video and the PowerPoint will be on the app later this week. So for example, a child knows that 5 add 5 is 10, they know that 50 add 50 is 100, they know that 55 add 45 is 100. Once they've had those basic facts, they can start doing lots more mental calculations. And that's why it's such a big emphasis. Recently introduced to the curriculum also was number bonds to 60, and the reason for that is time. Children, no matter 10 years of teaching time, children still always get to 60, and then they start at 61, 62, because they don't understand that time changes at 60. So we've introduced number bonds to 60. Partitioning. Partitioning just means making numbers in different ways. So, for example, the number 39 can be split into different ways. It can be 3 10s and 9 1s. If you're counting in 5s, it could be 7 5s and then 2 1s. So it's just looking at numbers in different ways so that they understand that this is actually not 3, it's 30. Place value, this is something that's really important. We really start in Key Stage 1 and FS in understanding, again, so that they're not making these mistakes, that actually this isn't a 3, this isn't a 2, it's a 30 and a 20. So place value just means the digits in each number, what they represent, based on where they're placed. And one of the trickiest ones with this one is the 0. And getting children to understand that actually these two numbers are not the same, but this and this is the same. So 0 is a really, really tricky one for them. So again, it's just understanding that if there's nothing here, that I can't just leave it blank, I've got to put in a 0 there. So to start adding and subtracting, I'm not going to spend so much time on the early stuff, but how we first begin introducing adding and subtracting is through models and images, and that's your hands-on, your practical stuff. We use a lot of Numicon in the school, which is a really fab resource. It's for kinesthetic learners. They can touch it, they can count it, they can draw around it. The 100 square is a fantastic resource. I can't emphasize how important it is that children begin to recognize patterns. I'm in year 5, obviously, and I'm teaching year 6 maths at the moment. And we just started algebra, and let me tell you, it is really, really hard. And part of that is they find it really difficult to recognize patterns in numbers. I think we start at the nth term, and when you go to find the nth term, you've got to find which times table is it in, and how it's different from your times table. And one of the trickiest parts they find is actually finding the jumps and going forwards and backwards in those jumps. And so we use the 100 square to develop that a lot. For example, if you're moving forward or backwards on the 100 square, only the 1s change. If you're moving up or down, only the 10s change and the 1s stay the same. So this is how we teach them how to count, not only in 1s, but in 10s. It's also good for you things like counting in 2s. So if you count in 2s, which rows are going to be highlighted? If you count in 3s, which ones are going to highlight it? One of my favorite activities in early Key Stage 2 in year 3, 4 is getting them to color one of these. Okay, color all the multiples of 5, now color all the multiples of 6. And they can actually look at the patterns on it. It's really great for early algebraic development. Then we move to the marked number line. Again, this is really early Key Stage 1. Counting on in numbers on the number line. And then we come to the anti-number line. Now this is one of the methods that you guys probably are not familiar with at all, because I was not familiar with it in the least. I had to relearn it when I went back to school. So this is actually what we call a mental strategy, and the reason it's mental is that when I do adding the digits in my head, I do it this way. So it's an easier way. So if I, for example, said to you, add the numbers right now. Add these in your head. Who can do it mentally? Right, Anna. Some of us are better at math than others.
I'm not good at mental math.
It's funny, because a lot of you can actually see your heads bouncing as you're carrying over the numbers in your head. And the issue with using columns in your head is that it's too easy to lose focus. Exactly. So what I would have done is I would have rounded this to 200. I would have added it to this number and then taken the 2 back off. Okay? Or for younger children, if this wasn't 198, if this was something else like 158, which isn't a roundable number, well then I would start by adding the 100, so you get 400. Then you got 7, 8, 6 and 8, 14, so that makes this an 8 and a 4, so 484. Okay? So how the children begin to develop that in their heads is they draw the number line. I've got a spreadsheet actually. 3, 6. Okay. So what they do is they plot their number line, and they start by putting the biggest number at the beginning, so that's your 326. They then partition the next number. So partitioning again just means breaking up your number into chunks. So 100, 50, and 8. Then they're going to add it bit by bit. So 326 add 100. Well, that's really easy because these numbers aren't changing. Only my hundreds are changing. And that's why it's called the mental method, because it's easier because you're only changing one number at a time and there's no carrying over. So this becomes 426. Then I add my 50. And again, because I know my pattern on my 100 square, I know to go 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 476. And I still use my fingers to count. I'm not even embarrassed or ashamed. It's a strategy. And then you add your final number, 8, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84. So this is why we teach this method first, so that they can begin to develop those mental strategies. It's also so important in that they should be able to look at these numbers and use estimating. So they're seeing that this is 100, this is a 300, so chances are my numbers aren't going to be over 500. So if I get an answer over 500, it's not going to make sense. I'm going to have to do it again. So it's using what they know and those strategies as well to estimate and guess and see actually how much, if my answer to be correct or if I need to have another go at it. For the younger years, they would have done it slightly differently, and that their numbers would have been smaller, so it probably would have been in hundreds. And instead of jumping in 50s, they would have jumped in tens instead. So they just would have broken it down into tinier steps. And again, that's just emphasizing those patterns in the number 51, 51, 61, 71, counting in multiples. Does everyone understand this a little bit? Okay. So the same thing with subtraction, we would do it the same way. But again, developing understanding numbers. If I had something like this, what I would hope a child would do is they would look at this and go, actually, these two numbers are really close together, so it doesn't make sense to subtract it. It makes more sense to count on. If there's less than a 10 difference in your tens, it doesn't make sense to do your whole long thing. It makes more sense to go actually 59, 60, and then add 8, so 9. Okay? And again, using the number line for that understanding. So when you're subtracting, you do it the same way, but you start at the other end. So if I've got 68 here, and I'm subtracting, I'm going to subtract, partition this again. I'm going to subtract 50, so that would be 18. And then subtract the 9, and that would be 9. Okay? But then, again, this number line helps in that if I put the 59 here, I should recognize that there's not going to be a lot of jumps between them, and it's easier to count on. So the whole reason we do the methods, I keep saying it over and over again, but it's just to make sure they understand the number. They should also understand that their answer, because it's subtraction, is going to be smaller, not bigger. Okay. So we get understand number line? Ready for next? Okay. From the number line is when we move on to partitioning to add and subtract, and this is early early column addition. So you get your numbers. And all it is it's adding in the columns, but you're just adding information to make sure you're not making mistakes. So this becomes 200 plus 90 plus 3 if you partition it. This one is 500 plus 20 plus 1. And then from there I'm going to add it. So I add my 1s, which is 4. I add my 90, my 20. That one bridges. So that's 110. So I put my, 111. I get 110. So then this becomes this, and then I carry over to my hundreds. 5, 6, 7, 8 hundreds. So it makes sense. 4, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. See, I told you I'm really bad at mental math, so I always need to double check my answers. And so it's just a visual way, again, so that they're understanding it's not 9 add 2, it's 9 add 20. And just by writing it out, you're getting them to recognize that. And then from there, that's when we do without this bit, and you just add with your carryovers. And this is probably the one that you and I are more familiar with what we would have done in school. So this is called formal column method. This is the one by end of year 6. They should be able to do this, including decimals. Do you want to do another one so you can see it properly?
Yeah, for instance, that
So here. So you start by adding your 1s, 5, 8 add 8 is 16, carry over, 2 add 2 is 4, add 1 is 5. So by the end of year 6, they technically should be able to use this method for numbers up to 1 million with up to 3 decimal points. They would never be given a sum that big, but they should be able to do any of those sums, even with 3 decimal points. One of the biggest struggles we have in year 5, 6 at the moment is they forget that when you're adding and subtracting numbers, you need to line up your decimals. And they always forget it. So if they're given something like 2.1 add 29.36, what they'll do is they'll go 2.1, 3, 6, 29, which is not going to give you the right answer. So I always tell them, when you button up your shirt, what happens if you don't button it up properly? Well, you end up a bit crooked. So it's the same with our numbers. You have to add your numbers and line up your decimals. And if there is no number here, we just put a 0, because when we put zeros after the decimal, it doesn't change the number. Just like putting a 0 here, it doesn't change the number. And again, they understand this through the place value work that we've done. We good for adding and subtracting? Okay. Right, multiplication, same thing, early development, you start by counting in numbers, you've done it before I'm sure, counting your socks, counting your shoes, have 5 fingers, how many fingers are in the class? We move on to finding patterns in the 100 square, so counting 2s, counting 5s, counting 10s. And then we begin to introduce it by introducing arrays. Arrays just helps them understand that 4 times 5 actually means 4 groups of 5. And it also helps them understand that it means the same as 5 groups of 4. And again, with multiplication division, it's teaching them that adding and multiplication can be done in any order, the numbers don't matter which one. But division and subtraction, you need to do it in the proper order. So this helps them understand that it's actually 4 groups of 5 or 5 groups of 4. Then they begin to use it as repeated addition. So 4 times 3 is actually 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 4 times. And then they begin to use it on the number line like this, where they begin to add in groups, and they just keep a tally on the bottom like they would with the number line. Now by the time they get to year 3, this is the again, just another mental strategy for the children. I know the stats, I've been doing a lot of stats practice with my kids right now, and they'll get a question in the mental math test, and it's, what is 4 times, 13? I'm going to do that mentally. So for me, if I was doing it in column, it's 4 times 3, and then you carry over. But again, every time you carry over, you risk that of forgetting or losing track. So 4 times 13, I would just do 4 times 10, which is 40. 4 times 3, 12, and then I'd add that mentally. And these are the jottings, and this is where jottings come from this method. So, for example, I'll show you how it's done. If I have the numbers, let's do 39 times 5, you draw yourself a little grid, times the corner. We start with partitioning our tens number to 30 and to 9. So then I put that on my grid, 30 and 9. And then my second digit goes on this side. So what I'm basically doing is I'm doing 5 times 30 and then 5 times 9. So then they go 5 times 30, well they do 5 times 3, which is 15. And because this one has a placeholder, I add another placeholder. So it's really important. I'm really strict with my language with my kids. And they always say, well, you just add a 0. And I go, okay, 15 add 0 is what? Still 15. Adding 0 doesn't change your number. So you notice our year 5s right now, they'll go, it's adding a placeholder, like Miss Ashley says, it's a placeholder, not a 0. So then they add their placeholder, and then they go 5 times 9, which is 45. And then they can add these ones mentally. 150 add 140, or add 45 is 195. So your answer is 195. And again, it's about them choosing. Some of the children will line this up at the bottom in columns because they're more comfortable with that. Whereas most children will just go, actually that's an easy add for mental math because I know that all I have to do is add my 4 to my 5, that's 90, and then add the 5, doesn't change anything else, 195. And again, if you had a 2-digit number, so if this was 56, you would just do and double your grid. Now this method is only used up to 2 digits by 2 digits. Any more than that and you get too many answers to add at the end and it's not an efficient method. And part of teaching the children this is deciding when different methods are efficient. So after this, I wouldn't use this one anymore. So it would be the same 50 times 6 times 30, 180, 6 times 9, I'm going to do that by 6 times 8, well, 54. So I still use my fingers for my 9 times table, so. And then you would add it up, all your questions this way. Are we okay with the grid method? Okay. After the grid method, in year 5, we begin to introduce the formal method, which is the one that you and I probably did in school. Yeah, this is the one that I would always go to. So 60. And so you go through and you start with 5. So you do 5 times 8, which is 40. Carry over. That's right, yeah. 5 times 6 is 30, 34. Then we cross out this one because we don't want to use it again in our next one. And then because I'm multiplying the tens, and this is often where they make a mistake if they don't understand place value, is they won't put a placeholder here. The reason I put the 0 here is because I'm multiplying in my tens column. I'm not multiplying in my ones columns anymore. So 2 times 8 is 16, you carry over again. 2 times 6 is 12, add 1. 13, I add these two together. 1700. So by the end of year 6, again, they should be able to use this one for up to 5 digits and up to 3 decimal places. Now what gets tricky with this one is we've just drilled into their head, adding, subtracting, line your decimals up, line your decimals up, line your decimals up. When actually when you're multiplying with this one, you don't need to line your decimals up anymore. They need to understand, again, I'll do a really quick decimal one. So 6 times 1.34. So you would just line that up. I'm not lining it up. What I tell the children is when you're multiplying with decimals, just pretend they're not there for a minute. Just kind of throw them away and we'll ignore them for a second. So I have them just put your biggest number on top then, you multiply. 6 times 4, 24. 6 times 3, 18, 19, 20. 6 times 1, 6, 7, 8. So now I've got my answer, I've got to put my decimals back in. So I go, how many did I have up here? Well, I had 1, 2. So I go 1, 2, my decimal goes there. So multiplication, they've got to understand, ignore the decimals, pretend they're not there, add them in at the end. We okay for multiplication? Anyone? Okay. Last one, division. Division, we start by having and sharing. Again, sharing, so for example, you've got 15 sweets, you've got 3 friends, give them each until everyone's all spread out. Then they begin to understand that it's not just sharing, it can be done by grouping. So 8 divided by 3 is 6, so when you count in threes till you get to that number, and then you count how many groups you have. And then we move on to the bus stop. Now, a lot of calculation policies will include a method called chunking, and I've been teaching maths for 10 years, and I've never had success with the chunking method. So we've actually taken it out of our curriculum, and we go right into bus stop method in year 3. Year 4. So year 3, they'll still be grouping and sharing. So, sorry, you gotta hear. So they'll still be grouping and sharing in year 3, and then in year 4, we go straight into the bus stop method. Being honest, I've never, ever had success with chunking. No matter how many different ways I've tried to teach it, I've tried to explain it, there's just too many steps and the children tend to get lost in it. So the bus stop method. This is again one that you and I are probably more familiar with. So 5 into 296. And this one, I know you guys, all your kids are on Timetable rock stars, right? Yeah, most of you are doing it. It's had such a success with children. So obviously I'm in year 5, 6, and like 80% of the curriculum is fractions, decimals, and percentages, and they cannot access any of that curriculum until they know their times tables. And not just their times tables, but their division facts as well. So for example, what the children struggle with is they know 5 times 4 is 20, but they don't know 20 divided by 4 is 5. So it's really important that they understand both, because they're going to get to this, and they're not going to be able to solve it because they don't know the division facts and the multiplication facts really well, which is why we're really pushing the timetable rock stars. And it's great. We have about, I know we are year 5, 6 at the moment, but about 50% of our children can answer timetable questions in less than 2 seconds, which is faster than I can do it. I know in the UK they've just introduced in year 6 they have to take a times table test, and I think it's like 20 questions and they get 5 seconds each. In our year 3, our year 4s to our year 6s, every single child will pass that test at this point in the year, because they can all do it in about 4 seconds or less. So it's had a really, really massive impact on our children's timetables, and they would all fly through that test. So anyways, back to the bus stop method. So you ask yourself, 5 times what is 2? Well, it doesn't work. 5 doesn't go into 2, so it's 0. And then you've got to carry it over to your next number. Then I ask myself, well, 5 goes into 29 how many times? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. 5 times. My remainder is 4. So I ask myself now, 5 goes into 46 how many times? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. 9 times. My remainder is 1. Now, in year 3 and 4, or year 4, I would expect them to record that as remainder 1. In 5, they need to start recording it as decimals. So how do you go back into your decimals? You add a decimal, and again, adding zeros after decimals doesn't change the number. So then you carry over. 5 goes into 10 how many times? 2, there's no remainder, so it's 59.2. So year 3 and 4, they record as remainders. Year 5, 6, they start to record as decimals. And again, they should be able to find up to about 3, 4 decimals. And if it's one of the ones that continue, they should be able to round it to stop the number after 2 decimal points. Any questions about division? From that point, they move into your long division, which is and then they go 25 into 30, goes 1 time, and they subtract, it's 5, drop your number down, 6, 25 goes into 56 2 times, that's 50, subtract, 6, drop your 2, 25 goes into 62 2 times, that's 50 again, subtract, that's 12, and then you add your decimal, 0, drop the 0. 25 goes into 124 times, and then so it just keeps going until you get to your last decimal. So this is the long version of the bus stop, and it's used for 2 numbers, just again to prevent your mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes if you're carrying over, if you're not doing proper subtractions. So this is again year 6. I would expect year 6 to do this. This is the only year group that would be accessing this one. So you guys, you got a few years still. We'll do another one in another couple of years, okay?
For sure. We'll come back and use the next group.
Yeah, we'll do it. We won't leave you hanging with these ones. So that's our calculation policy and how we move into school. How can you support at home? Really easy ways. Make math purposeful. At the shop, finding change. It's really funny, every year I do money, they don't have an idea about British coins, but they can all use dirhams absolutely fine. So getting them used to as well, different currencies from your home country. Estimating is so important for these children. So it's questions like, if you've got a child year 5, 6, right guys, I've got a half a tank of petrol left. That's about 250 kilometers I can get on it. We're driving to Abu Dhabi, which is 180 kilometers. About how much of my tank of gas will I have left when we get there? So it's asking those types of questions then. Oh, we've got to go get milk and bread, but I've only got 10 dirhams on me, and it's, you know, £3 or 3 dirhams 50 and 6 dirhams. Will I have enough money, or should I go back to the ATM? So it's asking this question where they're estimating and they're guessing and they're using things in real life. Time, again, cooking, if I put it at 11:15, it takes 45 minutes, how long? Recipes, especially year 5, 6, I know you keep talking about it, ratio and proportion. Oh, this is the recipe for 4 people, but I've actually got 8 people coming over for dinner tonight. What do I need to do this recipe right now? Or it's a recipe for 6 people, but I'm only cooking for 3, so what do I have to do to that recipe? During the week, look outside for patterns. For example, how many times can you find 30 in your week? Can you find it on house numbers, at the shop? Where can you recognize these numbers? Games like Snap or Bingo, board games, more for younger children, but songs. I was saying this fact in the other meeting. If you ask a 7-year-old child if they're good at maths, they will tell you yes or no. What they've decided by the age of 7 is what they will believe for the rest of their lives. So a child has decided by the age of 7 whether or not they're going to be good at maths in life. And once they've made that decision, it's near impossible to change it. So one of the things that's so important and what causes children to have that reflection of themselves is that maths is a yes or no subject. It's a right or wrong answer. So it's about turning closed questions and making them more open so there's not that fear or that anxiety associated with maths. And one of that is by, instead of saying, like, look at these pictures, which one's 2/3? That's a yes or no. The child's going to make the right answer or the wrong answer. But if you open it up and say, actually, here's some coloring pencils, here's some blues and green, how many ways can you show me what 2/3 looks like? And then there is no right or wrong. They're able to express what they understand and their understanding of that fraction is. I do this with my kids a lot. The answer is 45. What is the question? You know, some children who struggle with numbers might go 40 at 5, 4 times 10 plus 5. Where your highers, your flyers will go, 2 times 50 minus 55 or half, and they'll differentiate. But they're going to show you what their understanding of that number is. Just some different questions to ask children when they're exploring with maths. Again, making it not so much about what's 5 times 3, but how do you find 5 times 3 if you don't know the answer. Puzzles and games, links to real life. I saw a really fantastic lesson in year 5. It was about football players and their heartbeats, and they had to create a team based on heartbeats and whether they would be better performers and they look at stats, and it was so amazing. They just were really, really engaged in that. Education City we still have access to, which are tons of games where they can go and practice. Of course, Timetable Rockstars, some useful websites. These all have math games on them. And that's it. Do you guys have any questions? Need to know anything? No? Yes, this will be the recording and this will be on the website, so you'll be able to access all of it. I was asked by a parent to, on the sheets where it shows the calculations, put the keywords like this is partitioning, this, that. So I'm going to have to fix it up just a little bit and then we'll post it on as soon as I'm done. Okay? Anything else?
Thanks, Ashley.
Oh, sorry. 3, 4. Year 3 and 4 use the number line, yeah. Oh, yeah. So they'll be doing both at this point. They will be doing both. So they'll be taught the column in 3, and then from there they're going to choose which one works for them for the different calculations. But yeah, they will have been introduced to columns by year 3, yes. Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.